On today's show, it's the 2025 NBA Draft. Who are the biggest winners and losers of the first round? Pelicans with the worst trade of the night. Suns adding some defense, and the Nets make history with 5 selections. It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And joining me is my partner in crime, host of Locked On Heat, David Ramil. David, your thoughts on the 2025 NBA Draft?
I love the draft. I don't like the idea of scouting players and stuff like that, but I love the optimism that defines a night. You know, 30 teams really excited about their futures, 30 young men beginning their NBA careers, all of them with dreams and aspirations, and the fact that they were able to achieve those. I like it. I like the emotions of when they shed tears out there. I love the fact that they have their families for these special moments. That to me is the best part of the draft, because we have no idea whether these players will pan out or not. But for at least one night, everybody's optimistic, and that's great to see.
More optimism on draft night, because draft night's like real optimism. I'm thinking like the feigned optimism that you get from like media day, where like all 30 teams are like, yeah, we're the healthiest we've ever been, we're talented. Like you were taking that like actually like kind of like you were taking that like a wholesome way and like, you know, actually like meaningful, sentimental. And I was just like, all I could think of was the feigned optimism from media day, where every team convinces themselves they have a chance for a title. All right, we want to thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every single day. We're going to get through some of the biggest winners and losers from the first round of this 2025 NBA draft. We're going to get into some of the trades that took place during the first round. The Pelicans with, I don't know if David will be able to convince me otherwise. I think it was just a god-awful trade. Suns adding some defense, and the Nets making all 5 of their selections, despite the rumors that they might package some of those picks, make a deal, move further up in the draft. Pels walk away with a NBA historic 5 selections in the first round of the draft. David, let's just start right here. Right off bat, you know, everything goes chalk at the top. Cooper Flagg goes number 1. Dylan Harper goes number 2. VJ Edgecombe, who was certainly, in play at number 3 for the 76ers. I don't think there's really a shock there. The biggest shock probably comes at number 5 first. Maybe Con Knuppel, at number 4 might have been a bit of a reach for Charlotte, although I like his shooting there. Solid pick overall. A little bit higher than I probably thought he would have ultimately gone. But Ace Bailey, all the drama surrounding him in the lead up to the draft, declining workouts, declining interviews, intentionally trying to tank his draft stock to try and get to, one of Washington or New Orleans or Brooklyn. And it just totally backfires on him. And he gets drafted by the Jazz, even though he had like the Jazz, they weren't on his radar at all. He wasn't expecting that to be the place that selected him. And you could see his react. Like this is supposed to be like the best night of your life. You're drafted, you make it to the NBA, and he looked absolutely miserable.
Yeah. The complete antithesis of what I just talked about in terms of the optimism. He was clearly disappointed in how it played out. And you wonder whether or not it was a smart move for Utah to even select him. I think it was clearly not a smart move for Bailey and his camp to kind of tank the whole draft process, the workout process, and everything else like that. I just wonder whether or not it'll backfire against Utah as well, because when you take a player who doesn't want to be there, well, generally they're going to find a way to get out. They might not give 100%. They might not be able to thrive there. And maybe they're just betting on culture and the fact that Bailey's talent will just trump everything else. But it seems like a hell of a risk, one that's not necessary. And I don't know why you would take it unless you're convinced that he's going to wind up buying in. But I don't know why he would either. So it's not a knock on the Jazz or anything like that. It's just right now they're clearly going at a different path. And for Bailey, he just didn't want to be there. So why bother taking that risk and taking a chance that he might wind up not thriving there? This is the whole point of the draft. This is why you've tanked, or at least been in a pretty heavy rebuild over the last couple seasons, to get a player who you believe in, will stay committed, will continue to grow and develop. And I don't know that they're going to get that in Ace Bailey.
Certainly. I mean, it's certainly a risk for Utah. We'll see if it plays out for him, or maybe this will just be another in the long line of, okay, player gets drafted to XYZ location that they don't want to be in. He'll be there for 4 years. He'll ink his extension, and then he'll force a trade out or just leave flat out and just be like, you know what? I don't want to be here anymore. I'm not fond of Utah. Get me out of here at all costs. But certainly feels like things backfired for Ace Bailey pretty catastrophically here with the all the pre-draft kind of, angling. maybe he thought the player empowerment stuff reached, counted for players that weren't in the NBA yet as well, but I don't think it quite works out that way. So I'm going to throw him in one of the biggest losers column of the draft at this point. Who do you walk away thinking walked away victorious? One of the best winners of this draft, David?
Well, clearly, the Dallas Mavericks, I think they did a pretty good job of drafting some good players there. I think the Atlanta Hawks also got some good deals there, and they made a trade with New Orleans Pelicans. They wound up getting the kind of players that they were looking for, and I think retooling a roster that they believe can contend. I mean, we've talked about it before, the Eastern Conference a little bit more wide open now. Some injuries are going to be affecting several of the teams at the top of the Eastern Conference. Orlando makes a move to get Desmond Bane. Cleveland showing perhaps a little bit more weakness than anticipated for such a historically good regular season team. And now Atlanta saying, you know what, we're willing to give this run with Trae Young another chance. And they wound up swinging some major trades there. So I think the Hawks had a pretty good draft night overall.
Yeah, Atlanta's certainly a team that we are going to be speaking a little bit more about as we navigate through this show, because we got to talk about the other side of that deal with the Pelicans. I don't know what Joe Dumars is doing, what direction he thinks this Pelicans team is going to be able to go this upcoming season. I do think that another team that walks away very, very happy with the outcome of this draft, and we'll talk about one would talk about the Suns a little bit later on. So one of the deals that they made, adding some defense to their roster. But I think the Spurs, obviously, Cooper at the top for the Mavericks, that makes a lot of sense. They get Dylan Harper, they get the guy they wanted. Carter Bryant at 14 to San Antonio. I just, as he kind of slipped down the board, and maybe slip isn't the right word, because that's kind of about the range where you expected Carter Bryant to ultimately fall, kind of, the late lottery range more so. Saw some mocks that had him maybe up at the 10-11 range. But for him to get to go to that situation with his skill set to play, alongside all that other young talent in San Antonio walks away with this draft total winners, right? The only issue for San Antonio being potentially, do you have, the developmental runway now to, get Steph Castle and Dylan Harper the minutes while also still featuring, right, De'Aaron Fox, the guy you just made your marquee blockbuster trade for this past season?
I think you worry about that down the road. I think we saw with Oklahoma City, you can't really ever have too much talent. And so acquiring these players, I think in today's league, you're always going to wind up finding players and finding opportunities for them to contribute, so long as they're ready and so long as they have the ability to do so. That beats anything else. And so for a player like Brian, I think he's going to find a way to thrive there. And I was hoping he'd slip all the way to number 20 at Miami. I know that was kind of unrealistic, but you're right. I did see him as a kind of a late, maybe 10-ish player. And I thought maybe he would continue dropping a little bit. So the situation seems like an ideal one, because again, with all that young talent, you kind of get a chance to develop and grow together, and kind of iron sharpens iron, as cliche as it might sound. So I think it's a great situation for him. And with little expectation, because that team will not be his to run. He doesn't have to take over and command that group the way some of the players at the top of the draft will. So I think it's an easier situation for him to just find his footing and thrive there. And so I think it's a great deal for San Antonio.
You threw, when we talked about the winners a moment ago, just kind of piggybacking off that point about expectations, how much pressure, if any, in your mind is on Cooper Flagg, given the whole, situation with Nico Harrison and the Luka trade, and, Mavericks luck into this number 1 overall pick. There's all the, tampering or, the NBA's rigged allegations, all that stuff, the conspiracy stuff. So, I mean, how much pressure do you feel like Cooper Flagg is potentially under, literally as a rookie this next season, to perform at a level that would be commensurate with Mavs fans feeling not okay, because they're never going to feel
Right.
okay about, the outcome of the Luka trade. But just what's your read on that situation for him in Dallas?
I don't think there's any pressure. Not from my point of view, and I'm sure maybe Locked On Mavericks might have a different view, but I just think that because Luka was such a singular force for Dallas, that it's futile to try and compare anybody who follows in his footsteps and try to say, well, he has to live up to those gaudy expectations. You still have this roster. You still have Jason Kidd as your coach. You have Anthony Davis. You've got Kyrie Irving there. Cooper, as the third best player on that team, can just go and find a way to thrive and kind of coexist and learn the NBA game. And so I think the expectations will actually be lower. I don't think there'll be any pressure on him, even as the number one pick, because that team expects great things out of their two stars, already established NBA stars on that roster. Flagg, as long as he just has some good moments as a rookie to punctuate what it will be a learning process for him, I think Mavericks fans will be happy with that, because I just, it's a different situation. It's like when Wembanyama was drafted, that was a team clearly in a rebuild, and there was nobody else to kind of deflect or absorb some of the focus from the fan base or anything like that. It was, is this guy really going to pan out? Is he going to be the superstar, the generational talent everybody said he was? And certainly he lived up to those expectations. With Flagg, I don't think the expectations are quite as high on him. And again, comparing him to Luka doesn't seem like a worthwhile effort. So I don't think there's going to be that much pressure at all.
Coming up, we'll keep weighing winners and losers from the first round of the NBA draft, as well as getting to whatever the hell the New Orleans Pelicans are trying to do with this deal that they struck with the Atlanta Hawks. We'll break that down and so much more in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. Look, there's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you're wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn it into a space that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for summer. Wayfair has everything that you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs, gazebos, and even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without the resort price tag. My girlfriend and I, we just redid the patio a little bit, and we added a few new lounge chairs from Wayfair, and it's awesome. We basically created our own little personal slice of heaven back there. We love to entertain guests, having them out there for drinks or playing board games outside when the weather's nice. It's awesome. You can experience it too. Don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. That's wayfair.com, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA Game Night. Thanks so much for making Game Night your first listen each and every day. Be on the lookout for our other sister show, the Midday Locked On NBA show with Doug Hayes and Matt Moore. Check that out every single day. They'll also have some takes, I'm sure, about what took place here in the first round of the NBA draft. And man, David, we teased up the Hawks a little bit a moment ago as one of the winners of it. Well, let's talk about the other side of this trade. We'll talk about both sides here in this segment, because I think this was maybe possibly the deal of the night, easily the most shocking deal of the night, I feel like, for most people, given what New Orleans ultimately elected to do here. So the trade being New Orleans sending out the 23rd overall pick in the draft. No big deal. They get back the number 13 overall pick in the draft. Okay, cool. You move up 13 spots. You draft Derek Queen. You get yourself a center to pair in the front court with Zion Williamson. Awesome. That sounds great on paper. It was the other asset that Joe Dumars and company decided to send out: a 2026 first round pick, unprotected, the most favorable of either the Pelicans first rounder or the Milwaukee Bucks first rounder. Both teams going into, the Pelicans coming off of just an absolutely horrendous season. And the fact that they're basically like one Zion hamstring away from a repeat of, barely scratching 20 wins, 21-61 this past season. And then the Milwaukee Bucks, who are dealing with, a Damian Lillard injury, right? So I can't make heads or tails of this. Like, this is maybe one of the worst trades that I remember in recent history. Like, this has so much potential to backfire if you're New Orleans, it's not even just like they're in the stacked Western Conference. Maybe if you were in the East, I could see this being like, okay, you're bought in, you bring in some young talent, you get Jeremiah Fears with your first pick, you bring in Derek Queen, you've got this young talent. They're going to be missing DeJounte Murray for part of the season too. I can't. This is an awful trade, David. Can you convince me otherwise, or are you on board with this assessment?
No, I tend to agree with you on this one, Jackson. I just think it's awfully short-sighted, and it's a hell of a gamble. Unnecessary one too. Like, I just don't think it would have meant that much to jump up those 10 spots and risk that draft capital. You're banking on being much better than history shows you will, especially with all those kind of glaring injuries. And I just don't know why you would take that chance and wind up losing another opportunity to replenish a roster that desperately needs it. I know they just finished that trade, sending out CJ McCollum. There's a lot to scratch your head about here, and it just doesn't seem to make any sense. So I don't know if Dumars has had a chance to speak to me yet. It might not happen until tomorrow or at some point later this week. But I'm curious to hear what his explanation will be. And, I don't think it'll be well received by Pelicans fans.
And looking at their here's the thing is, if you could guarantee that Zion was healthy all season long, I can see the argument, right? But so much of it is dependent on Zion's health, and there is not a good track record of health there for you to bank on this and to potentially be losing an asset that could be as valuable as a top 5 pick in what is supposed to be a very loaded 2026 draft class for a team that desperately needs some upside talent, especially given the fact that, this is a team that was rumored to be, canvassing the NBA landscape and trying to maybe look at moving on from Zion, right? Like, there were reports suggesting that they were looking at trying to trade him previously, whether at the deadline or last offseason, because they just don't know, his future is so uncertain as an NBA player, given his health concerns. So there's no doubt about it. When Zion is healthy, he is one of the best players in the NBA, but he's so unavailable that this just seems like an awful trade. But on the flip side of it, for Atlanta, what a fantastic move for them. They drop back 10 slots in the draft. You still get Asa Newell, who is going to be a great pickup for them. Love that selection for Atlanta. And like you were talking about earlier in our first segment, Atlanta might be a team. Look, they were kind of on the fringe this past season. They, weirdly enough, like, what is Atlanta doing? Because this past season, right, we thought that Atlanta was maybe going to make some noise in the East. And then at the deadline, it's like they dumped all their talented players. They were like, no, we're gonna make these moves. And I don't think anybody thought those moves would make the Hawks better per se. Like, moving on from Bogdanovich, losing, who else did they lose? I'm blanking off the top of my head. Help me out here, David.
I can't recall exactly who it was, but
okay, but they made a handful, a couple different trades at the deadline that people thought, looked at. I remember we looked back on it thinking, why would Atlanta do this when it felt like they were, actually, poised to, make a little bit of a run here in the East.
Oh, yeah. Bogdanovich. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I said Bogdanovich, but I feel like there was another one in there too. I'm blanking on who the secondary trade was. Hunter, there we go, to Cleveland. There we go.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right.
There we go. Sorry. I knew I was missing another kind of a big name that was integral to their success at the time. But now with Porzingis in tow, and again, this is another one where, like, health permitting, right? They have Porzingis, they get Jalen Johnson back, Risa Shea, right, another year older, still Dyson Daniels, Trae Young in that backcourt. They've got some depth. Maybe they start on Kongwu next to Porzingis, depending on how Jalen Johnson looks health-wise. Like, I don't know. This is a Hawks team that, as long as they've got Trae Young as their engine, and the right pieces around him, which, health permitting, Kristaps Porzingis is going to be a great pickup for them. I feel like in an open Eastern Conference, right, with so many of the teams kind of, up in the air right now with what's going to happen with the Celtics, with the Pacers, with Halliburton, with Tatum, with the Bucks, with Dame, like, the East feels more open than ever at this point. And this could be a chance for the Hawks to maybe jump up and be like a top 4 team in the East next year, top 6 maybe.
Yeah, I certainly, he seems like a possibility. And they also have Clint Capella on the roster too, or would they be looking to move him as well? So
free agent.
Yeah, well, there you have it. So, there's there's still potential there. And I think you look at Atlanta and you have a top tier talent in Young, and yeah, you can kind of rebuild or retool the roster to a certain degree. And I think you see that a lot with the East as far as teams recognizing a greater opportunity and a chance to go on a deep playoff run. And I think they've positioned themselves very nicely with the kind of acquisition of talent that they've had over the last year. So I think they're really at the right place. And they weren't, they were a tough team to figure out this past season with some definite inconsistencies there, but you got the top pick in the draft. You make some nice moves now. You continue to bolster everything around Trae Young, and you kind of lean into this idea that we're going to do it again. We're going to continue taking chances and seeing what happens during the course of the season. And I think that's a smart risk as opposed to what we were talking about earlier.
And they might, and the fact that that's, juxtaposed the two sides of the same trade is kind of funny. Coming up, one more team that made a very shrewd move, a very solid trade. The Memphis Grizzlies coming away with a great prospect, as well as the Suns adding some defense, and the Nets making a historic 5 selections in the first round. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Skims. Look, when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I'll admit I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, had to give them a try. And let me tell you, they absolutely live up to the hype. Look, the worst thing about, underwear in the past for me is, I'm a boxer briefs guy, and over time, right, sometimes even as quickly as like 3 months, 6 months of just continual wear and tear, washing them, they start to like bag out. They're not as comfortable anymore. They're not as, form fitting. That's the worst feeling ever. That doesn't happen with Skims. They are the best underwear that I've ever owned. I like the stretch 5-inch boxer briefs. They're perfect for an active lifestyle. They move with me, never lose their shape, and stay in place all day long. Whether you're working out or running errands, they're absolutely fantastic. You can check them out. Just head to skims.com. Shop all sorts of different products at Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey drop-down box and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, go check them out at skims.com. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night. Appreciate you for making us your first listen. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On show for your favorite team. Maybe you want a different perspective on what's going on with the New Orleans Pelicans. Maybe Jake Madison over there will have some copium for that deal that they struck. I cannot. I'm going to have to tune in to Jake myself and see what he has to think about that deal. Let's go to Memphis, actually, striking a deal with the Portland Trailblazers that ultimately landed them Cedric Coward, who I think is one of the best pickups in this draft. He was a guy that was skyrocketing up draft boards. And this is, you look at him as essentially right there, Desmond Bane replacement. And that's maybe a lot of, a pretty heavy set of expectations to put on a rookie's shoulders right out of the gate. But I like his fit in Memphis, and I think he slots in beautifully next to Ja Morant and Triple J.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I think it's a great fit. He's a name who's been kind of up and down a lot of boards lately, but he had been slowly climbing. And I think while it might seem like a little bit of a reach, I trust that they're going to be able to make the most of his talent and utilize him the way he's supposed to. So I think it's a great pickup, and he does seem like a player who can fit in seamlessly. My co-host over at Locked On Heat said it was actually an upgrade over Desmond Bane. So I'm not sure that I would go that far, but I could see why Coward is going to be a good player and somebody that you might want to make a move to acquire. And I think it's going to pay off pretty high dividends for Memphis.
I'm certainly excited to see what his career ultimately looks like. Although I'm not excited for the Southwestern division to just get even more and more stacked. It's just this is going to be an awful division to have to play in for the next 10 plus years. It's just awful. All right, let's take a look at what the Phoenix Suns did. One of the earlier trades of the evening. So obviously the Suns, I won't say reeling in the aftermath of the Kevin Durant deal, but we know that the Suns, have traded Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets. They get back Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and the number 10 selection in the draft, which, as an aside, you know what? I'm going to go on a rant for a second, David. I have to rant about this. I'm sorry. I got to get it off my chest.
All right. All right.
I despise the fact that the NBA makes these prospects, makes these young men on the best night of their lives, making it to the NBA, walk across the damn stage and put on a hat for the team that they're not actually playing for. It's the dumbest thing that the NBA does. It's worse than any of the officiating debacles. How can we not fix this one thing? Everybody and their grandma knows that Kaman Malawach is not going to the Houston Rockets. And he had this beautiful emotional moment talking, in his interview, talking about what it meant to him, tears in his eyes, so happy, for this moment, this achievement in his life. And he's doing it all with a Rockets hat on. And that's not the team that he's going to. He's going to Phoenix. Like, to rob these players of these magical moments, it just seems so dumb. I'm sorry. I just got to get that off my chest.
No, I could see why you feel that way. I don't think the players are concerned about it, though. Remember that for them, it's not necessarily what team you get to play for or anything like that. So that doesn't really matter so much. It's the fact that they're in the NBA, that they continue to play basketball, that their careers will continue, and quite frankly, that they'll make a lot of money. At least that would be my guess as to why they're so happy the way they are. It doesn't really matter.
Honestly, totally fair. I think about it from the perspective of like when you've got like these lifers potentially, and I know that term doesn't get used much in today's NBA anymore, but if you draft a player, like how cool would it be if you were able to draft a player and like look back on their draft night and be like, yeah, like this is the player that like brought us titles, championships, like this is our franchise guy, and you want to reflect back on draft night. And it's like, oh, he's wearing a for the Rockets, it's right now it's Alperen Sengun, right? Dude, has been the Rockets' best player, but he's wearing an OKC hat on draft night, and that sucks. It's like, well, they traded him, or traded his draft rights. Anyways, just wanted to get that little blurb off my chest. I'm curious how other people feel about the stupid hat thing. Let us know in the YouTube comments, because it bothers me, and I know it bothers some other people as well. It's like a recurring topic every single year. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Suns, though. Look, they made the Kevin Durant trade. People have been trying to figure out what the direction is going to be for this Suns team in the aftermath of trading KD. They luck into Kaman Malawach. I thought this was to me one of the bigger surprises of the night, is Malawach falling all the way down to 10. I thought he would have been a lock to go to Toronto at 9. Honestly, he screams to me a Masai Ujiri kind of guy. So for Phoenix to be able to pick him up at 10 to address like the gaping hole at their 5 spot, and then subsequently for them to make a trade to acquire Mark Williams, pending his physical, assuming it doesn't get denied a second time. This is a pretty substantial pickup for Phoenix, where they picked up not one, but 2 solid defensive-minded centers. They add Dylan Brooks. They have Ryan Dunn. Like, David, are we maybe looking at the Phoenix Suns turning things around a little bit and adding some, defensive culture and identity to a roster that they are hell bent on trying to compete with this next season?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I struggle to see whether or not they'll remain or not be elevated to the role of a very good team right away, because I think they're still missing a key component there, a superstar level talent. They just don't have. I mean, Devin Booker is that, yeah, but they're just, I don't know. They're a few pieces away there. I like the move.
If you ask Rockets fans, Jalen Green is a superstar level talent. So how dare you?
Yeah, well, I think you would say otherwise. So I think I'll trust your judgment on that one. Not to throw you under that rocket shaped bus there, but I know some people were critical of kind of overloading at one position, but to be able to shore up an area of need, and that going into all these various trades that they were focusing on adding a big man, and that they made no it's about their desire to add a player like that, and to add 2 of them on a draft day trade and stuff like that. I think that's you know what? I think they're positioning themselves to be a solid team with some potential there. They're going to be a sneaky team, if anything else, but I wouldn't go so far as to say they're a playoff team yet.
Are you going to lump them into the winners column for the first round so far?
Let's do that. Why not?
Okay, all right. We'll give the Suns a W. You know what? Shout out to my guy Ben Garcia over there at Locked On Suns. We gave you a dub, buddy. We know you need it. All right, let's go to this. One thing that was really shocking was there were so many rumors and reports about the Nets owning 1/6 of the first round here. With picks, we had pick 8, then they had pick 19, pick. What was it? Oh my goodness. Pick 22, and then pick 26 and 27. 5 first round picks in this year's NBA draft. And they didn't do anything with it other than just make 5 selections, David. How surprised were you at no movement from the Nets and that they actually just walk away with 5 prospects, which Sean Marks said in his media availability immediately after the conclusion of the first round, that they think that each of their prospects that they selected all have some level of untapped potential, quote unquote. A historic number. This is the most selections we've ever seen one team make in the first round.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I don't know that was the right way to operate, because so much of a player's chances are their ability to thrive, to get the kind of playing time and minutes and focus and opportunity to develop. And you can't do that when you have so many young players there. Maybe they'll find a way to carve out minutes for all of them, but I just don't see it as a realistic thing. And I know I just talked about Oklahoma City adding as much talent as possible. That's always the goal, but the talent has to be complementary. There has to be something there that kind of ties it all together and allows them all to get the kind of minutes that they need to get in order to flourish and thrive. And so much of a player's chances at success at the NBA level is finding a team with the right fit. And now all of a sudden you're competing against 4 other rookies for playing time, or to find or carve your way out into the rotation. And that just doesn't seem like to me, it doesn't seem like a decision that makes a lot of sense. I would have probably preferred them trading a couple of those picks away for another player, a player of value, rather than having 5 guys that you all of a sudden have to find ways of playing at the same time. It just doesn't seem to make sense.
Another somewhat surprising outcome from the first round, Kasparas Giacosionis falling all the way to 20th to your Miami Heat. How are you feeling about that one? Because Kasparas was certainly a guy who was mocked to be at the, the later end of the lottery, right? Top 10 in some mocks. So how are you feeling about getting him at 20 for Miami?
I don't know what the concerns are. I don't know why he dropped. I don't know if we're going to hear anything right away. He addressed the media, but he didn't talk about why the drop took place. So I wonder if we'll get that kind of information later on. It might have been just a matter of, as my co-host on Locked On Heat theorized, that maybe he just didn't fit an area of need for those teams picking above Miami in the draft, but he winds up slipping to a team that desperately needs playmaking size. And I think he does that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he'll play and how he'll help make things so much easier for an offense that has been so sluggish and horrific to watch over the last few seasons. And I'm hoping he'll unlock even another level to Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware, and allow Tyler Hero to kind of flourish off ball as well. So I project him to actually wind up starting by the beginning of the season. So we'll see what happens there.
Wow. All right. Bold prediction from David here. And I got one more thing that surprised me on my end. Rasheer Fleming, a guy that I thought was going to be a lock to go at some point in the first round. Really shocked that he's not going to be selected until the second round here. He was a name that you saw, a lot of interest in draft circles around, NBA draft Twitter. All the draft heads were really high on this kid. Bit of a late bloomer, but at the same time, just, a tremendous amount of talent, some raw athleticism there. This weird, 4 or 5 tweener. If it was 10, 15 years ago, this guy would be, a top 5 pick, immediately. That's the kind of, play style that he has. Maybe it's not as important in today's NBA. I don't know. I was just shocked to see that his name didn't ultimately get called by somebody. I would have sworn that OKC would have swept in and taken him at 24th overall, but they went Neat Clifford instead. Any other surprises for you, David, that came out of this first round of the draft?
Not particularly, man. Like I said before, you can't really. I know a lot of people want to jump to conclusions and automatically assign grades and stuff like that. And I'll be honest. I mean, I understand that's part of the game of media, of having to cover these teams in the league at large and be able to determine whether or not we think that they've been good moves. But we could wind up being terribly, terribly wrong about all of these things that we've said today. So for now, nothing really surprised me. Just let's hope it all pans out for everybody. How about that?
Well, that's going to do it for our reaction to the first round of this year's NBA draft. Be sure to tune in to our next Locked On NBA Game Night, as they'll have you covered for the second round of NBA draft action. As always, thanks so much for being here with us on Game Night. We've got 2 episodes here on the Locked On feed every single day. Remember to help us grow by listening every single day wherever you get your podcasts and subscribing on YouTube. Until then, we will catch you guys on our very next Game Night.